All right, welcome everyone. This is our bat panel, and we're going to be talking today about myth busting some Nebraska bats stuff about them. So my name is Monica McCoubry. I am the wildlife education specialist with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.
I'm Amber Schultz. I'm the wildlife education program manager with the Fish and Wildlife Education Division here at Game and Parks. And we are super pumped to be talking about bats tonight, especially during Bat Week.
Yeah, it is Bat Week.
It's a national.
I forgot about that.
It's a national thing, right?
Bat Week.
Yeah. I feel like I'm just going to go on the record and say I think that should get more than just 1 week, but that's just my opinion.
For next year.
Yeah,
we can talk about that next year. Yeah.
So what are we talking about tonight?
We are going to be talking about bats.
Okay.
Short answer, bats. But they're very misunderstood. There's a lot of things that people don't know about them. They're a very studied species, but yet there's still a lot of mystery around them. And especially, with Halloween coming up, people have a lot of bat questions, and there's a lot of bat myths out there that maybe are true, maybe they're not true.
Yeah.
There's half truth to them. So we're going to figure that out tonight. So to do that, we asked our bat experts in Nebraska. So we actually have 5 different experts tonight that are going to be talking to us. And so maybe just to kind of kick things off, if all of our bat experts would kind of just to do a brief introduction of your name, what organization you work for, and then kind of how you work with bats or what your role with bats is in Nebraska.
Yes,
would be great.
Fantastic. Yep. And then once we do that, we'll get started with our questions. And we have lots of different questions to get through, but also we got some phenomenal questions from participants.
We really do.
And so towards the end, we'll make sure if we don't get to those questions, we will have a lightning round where we're gonna get our answers tonight.
Is that because it's raining outside, like lightning?
And I just heard thunder. So.
Yeah, that was great. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Sean, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I'm Sean Dunn. I'm a zoologist with the Natural Heritage Program at Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. And so as a zoologist, I actually cover a lot of different taxa. So I try to take care of our herp populations, insects, and small mammals. So when I say take care of, I mean, I do my best to try to keep track of our numbers. And if they start dipping down, then we talk to some of our land managers about how we can get their habitat improved for them. And so I've been working with bats off and on for a little over 20 years now, ever since my undergrad. And I think it was one of those things that I just had a colleague that was interested, and they started working with them and they needed some help. And so I kind of pitched in, and ever since then been working with them off and on. So they're just a really great group of animals that you always find something new about. So yeah, that's me.
Very cool. Thanks for being with us tonight, Sean. Who's next?
Sean, why don't you pick someone?
I like that.
Yeah.
Sure. All right, next to me is Christopher.
All right, yeah, I'm Christopher Phil. I'm the North American Bat Monitoring Program Coordinator in Nebraska. And so we're based out of University of Nebraska-Lincoln, the Nebraska Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit. And so our main goal with bats is, or one of the main functions of our project is to monitor. We put out sensors across the state, and so we use those to monitor the different bat species across the state and their activity levels, so population type stuff, and the different species distributions. So I came out to Lincoln to do my master's studying bats, and I feel like the bats sort of found me. I never really thought to go out, I never thought I wanted to be a bat biologist or whatever. I sort of stumbled into the field, and bats are they're very elusive and mysterious. A lot come out at night. They're the only flying mammal. A lot live in caves. So they're very hard to study species, and they're very elusive, mysterious. So I think that's a big draw to bats.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exciting. Thank you so much, Christopher. Christopher, who's next of our experts to introduce himself?
How about Brett? He's next to me.
All right, thanks, Chris. My name is Brett Anderson. I work at Game and Parks Commission here in Lincoln. I am in charge of our state wildlife grants and managing those. So every year we get federal funds from Fish and Wildlife Service to then use to protect our at-risk species in our state. And one thing we'll be talking about today is just how at-risk some of our bat populations are in the state. And so I'm in charge of kind of managing that funding, making sure that we're doing projects to help conserve our different species. When it comes to bats, I started off doing bat work about 10 years ago. I was an undergrad student at Nebraska at Omaha, and I was actually a fisheries biologist. That's what I thought I was going to go to, and that's the route I thought I was going to take. And I was in a class one day where the professor of the class suggested that there were students going out to go catch bats. And so he left it open as an option for anyone to attend. So I agreed to go, went down to Indian Cave State Park, caught 37 bats that night. Still remember that number to this day. Little did I know it's a bit of an anomaly these days in terms of the sheer number of bats you can capture. But from that point on, I was hooked. And so I've been traveling across the country, catching bats in different states. I've worked down in Texas, down in New Mexico and Arizona, and then over in Appalachia as well. So I've got to work with quite a variety of species. So it's amazing the different places I've been able to go and the different species I've been able to see. So yeah, so Aaron, you are up next to me here.
Thanks, Brett.
All right. Hi, my name is Erin Considine, and I work for the U.S. Forest Service out of Chadron, Nebraska, so the western part of the state. I work with all kinds of different critters as part of my day job, but with bats specifically, a lot of the work we've been doing out here is catching them in hand and doing some genetics and talking about white nose syndrome, which I'm sure we'll talk about later here today. And then we do acoustics as well, where we put detectors up and look at kind of where the critters are and what species are where. And then a big thing for the Forest Service out here is we have quite a bit of timber harvesting, so cutting down trees for post-fire, you know, whether it's trees that have burned or we're trying to eliminate fire in some areas or reduce it. And there's really sensitive times for bats when they're pregnant or when they're in their roost. And so trying to figure out ways to not be in those areas and where those areas are. So that's a lot of our work, is the timber component. And I think for getting into bats, I'm from Arizona originally, so we're always on fire. So bats and fire was a very natural piece for me. And I worked with a gal down there who was doing a lot of bats and skunk work and rabies. And so that was kind of my introduction. And I think once you see a bat in hand and work with them, they're just so charismatic and you kind of get hooked on them. And like Brett, I've kind of been all over the Southwest and parts of the tropics and studying bats. So they're just kind of, I don't know, they kind of hook you once you see them in hand, and they're hard to walk away from. So
That's cool.
That's cool that you have so much experience. You,
Yeah,
all of you have
I
so
know.
much experience. So
absolutely. I think there's one left we can hear from.
yeah.
Keith,
All right, are you
you're our last one, Keith.
All right, Keithlusso, professor at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. I've been here for 15 or 16 years. Before that, I was at the University of New Mexico, and at the university here, I teach all about mammals as well as herps, and I think I see one of my herp students' names down here, so we just got out of lab a little bit ago.
Oh, extra credit then, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I also teach a non-majors biology, conservation biology, bat biology, writing classes, a number of classes here at UNK. So I am probably a little different from everybody else in terms of when they got started. I could probably find a picture, but I started interacting with bats at 5 years of age. And so I have a picture of that. My dad is also a bat biologist, and so the apple did not fall far from the tree. And so he was a professor at the University of Nebraska, Omaha for 30 some odd years. And so I'm out here in Kearney now, so kind of following in his footsteps. And so I used to be his field assistant, and now he is my field assistant.
Oh, that's cool.
That is super cool.
I've been bat catching Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, Wyoming, Mexico, Panama, Nicaragua, Trinidad and Tobago, I think are pretty much all the places that I've been. So I study the natural history of organisms from all these things that I've talked about that I teach about. I'm big into getting students, undergrads, and even high school students a master's degree. Brett Anderson was my master's degree student a while back, working out with Aaron out in the Pine Ridge doing some bat research. So just trying to get the next generation of bat biologists, or multiple generations if I'm around long enough. So
Oh, that's amazing.
There might be someone tonight.
I was just thinking that. Yeah. We might have some future bat biologists
That'd be
right
awesome.
here in the.
all right.
Exciting.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for introducing yourself. So let's go ahead and talk about bats. Do you want to kind of introduce bats to us in Nebraska? Like, where do they live? What kind of species do we have?
I think that's what, yeah.
Yeah, paint us a picture of bats in Nebraska.
Yeah. So you starting off, how many species do we have in Nebraska? And now you guys have to fight for the
I'll go with 13. Am I on right?
That was my
13
understanding.
13 species in Nebraska. And as if you go further south in Kansas, you gain a few more. Generally, if you go further north or east, you'll reduce. And so if you want to see the most in the United States, I'd go to Arizona, Texas, maybe even Florida. They've got another whole group there. We've got a pretty good diversity in western Nebraska, and then it's pretty much another subset in eastern, and then there's a few species like the red bat and hoary bat and big brown bat that occur statewide. So
That's good. Actually, that was a question we had earlier is, we knew we had 13 here in Nebraska, and is that pretty typical, or are there states that have more or less? Is that a nice number for a state right here in central United States? But you kind of
if you go north, it usually declines. I forget, I did a presentation a while back, but I think South Dakota might be the same or one or two less bats. You go east, you start losing species, and south and west, you're going to gain a lot of species. So I think the number is 30 in New Mexico, and I don't know the number. Maybe Brett knows the number offhand for Texas, but it's probably a few more than that even. So
okay.
Yeah, I think it's 33 in Texas.
Wow.
Yeah, I think Arizona had 29.
Well, we're doing okay for 13 here in Nebraska.
We'll take 13 for
Yeah,
Prairie State.
absolutely. Yeah, for Prairie State. Where do you find them? You talked a little bit about there's some different bat species in the west versus the east, and some are statewide. So I guess maybe what kind of bats do we see in western Nebraska?
Sure. Well, I'll chat since I'm kind of our western person here, but we have the typical ones that you see across state, like the big brown bat, the little brown bat. We have the real fun, fuzzy ones like the hoary bat, the silver-haired bat, and the eastern red bat. Our two kind of oddities out here are the long-legged myotis and the western small-footed. Those are kind of two that I don't think they go much past central Nebraska. And then the oddity that really we don't know a lot about, that all of us can debate on, is the northern long-eared bat. And that I think Keith, you and Brett, you guys were the last ones that had it in Sheridan County. And then we've had it on Acoustics here in Dawes. And so we're working to try to get that confirmed in hand, that they're maybe making that move farther west. So
you mentioned
fun.
Acoustics. Like, talk to our audience maybe that isn't very familiar with that. We know sound, but what does that have to do with bats?
Yeah, how do you pick up those what are those acoustic sensors? How do you do that?
Well, Chris, as our NA bat person, do you want to chat acoustics?
I might actually have a sensor here in the office.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so basically there's like two main ways that researchers study bats. So you can go out and catch them, or a less invasive way is to put out these sound monitors that pick up the sounds that bats make. Because when bats fly around at night, they have about as good as eyesight as we do, so they can. Bats aren't blind.
Myth busted. We need one of those sound effects. But okay, sorry, go ahead.
But as we know, it's really hard to see at night. So they also supplement their eyesight with high frequency sound that basically functions like sonar. It's like airplanes, like even like dolphins and other animals will also use this. And so basically our devices can pick up the sounds that different bats make. And so this is what the unit looks like. So it's got a microphone. And so we mount these out across the state. And so different bats, it can get really tricky, but different bats have different features in the sounds that they make. And so we can, if we get high quality sounds, we can actually match calls to species.
Oh, wow.
We'll be able to tell like what bats are around. We won't know exactly how many because it could just be one or a few just flying around the monitor all night. But we'll at least know that those areas are heavily used by whatever species we pick up. And so we can sort of get an idea of where bats are.
That's super cool.
Yeah, very nice. How far or how close do they have to be, or how far away could it pick up a sound from a bat?
I think it depends on a lot of environmental factors, you know, where you have the detector. So if you put a detector out in the woods, the sounds that bats make, they're going to bounce off of the foliage and stuff like that, so they won't go as far. I think under the most ideal circumstances, it wouldn't be any more than 50 meters.
Okay.
I would say like maybe around 20 meters or less.
That's not bad. It's a good number.
So it also depends on like what sound the bat's making, because different frequency sounds carry further. So yeah, it can be kind of tricky.
Can we hear these sounds? I mean, are any of the frequencies like low enough that we can hear, or what's that kind of look like as far as what we can pick up with our human ears?
So I don't know the range that humans, like I don't know off the top of my head the number, but I know the bats that we pick up are usually around like 120 kilohertz to maybe 10 or 15. So I know different species in other states, they'll make sounds that we can hear. And when you catch bats, they'll make other sounds where basically screaming at you, and you can certainly hear them when they do that.
Huh. Interesting. Very cool.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about maybe our life history about bats in Nebraska. Are they pollinators? Do they eat insects? Are they insect specialists? Kind of stuff like that. Let's talk a little bit about maybe what they eat and what they do, their life history. Who would like to take that?
I can.
Go for it, Sean.
So just a big overview, very broad here. Bats in general worldwide are an extremely diverse group. I mean, there are bats that do everything. So, but the bats here in Nebraska are not pollinators. They are strictly insect eaters. And so they typically won't be found hovering near flowers or anything like some that you see in tropical regions when you see the pictures of the bats coming in with the long tongues and all that. We don't have any of those species here, but we do have a lot of insectivorous species that help control insect populations, which is really nice and helpful. So, and the other thing that's really cool, and since I've got a skeleton here, since we're just talking about some natural history.
Tonight. This is
Now, I've got a skeleton here.
Oh.
This is of a bat you're not going to find in Nebraska naturally.
Okay.
This is what's called a flying fox, or one of the Microchiroptera, so a large bat. But what's really cool is that it allows you to see their wing bones really clearly. And you can see that it almost kind of looks like a hand. And so the group name for bats is chiropteran, which means hand wing. And so you can kind of see where that came from, and that their wing bones look an awful lot like a human hand.
Yeah.
So just wanted to show that again. This is not something you will find in Nebraska.
Okay, Sean,
So,
really, really important question. that Monica kind of just alluded to. Why do they call this jazz hands? Why don't they call this bat hands? I went with that one.
Well, that's because, okay, you know, I feel like there's a disconnect a lot of times between the awesome work that biologists do and some other, functions and jobs that people get. And it's our job as scientists, I think, to do a better job of communicating things like that so people are aware, so that they can then name things like jazz hands properly. So that's
Really,
That was a great explanation.
and that is why we're here tonight. So thank you
Right.
very much. That's
so.
awesome.
Now, one other quick thing I will point out is, so this is the skull. Let me see if I can show this a little bit better.
Yeah, that's
This
nice.
is the skull of that bat that I just showed. All right. And so this is the skull now of a bat here from Nebraska.
Oh,
It's so small.
And in fact, this is from a big brown bat. So this is about as a big of a bat skull as you're going to find here in Nebraska.
that's fascinating.
So very, very small. And sorry, I realize my camera on my laptop is not the best here.
Well, that's really cool though, that size comparison.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How
And
big
so-
are the wings? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, part of that is, and you saw how tiny those bones were in like the wings and everything of these bats, being the only mammals capable of true flight. That's an adaptation that they use so that they can actually fly. They've got very, very thin bones. Their musculature is just exactly what they need to fly and nothing else. And so when you have one of these in hand, and obviously everybody here can attest to this, they're very lightweight. I mean, we're talking about the weight of like a nickel or a quarter. That's how much our bats weigh. And so they're very small, very kind of fragile, actually, when you get them in hand. But yeah, you can certainly find them all over the state in all habitats, including all of our cities.
Okay, so they eat insects. No fruit.
Yes.
No one is pollinating the agave for the tequila here in Nebraska, unfortunately, but still very important species to have in our state. What about, I'm curious about our winters. Obviously, our winters here in Nebraska are a bit frigid.
We don't have insects in the winter.
It's
Like
true.
they're just not out.
And if they're insect eaters, so
How do they-
obviously they have, okay.
Okay.
So Brett, do you want to speak to that? What do our bats here in Nebraska do in the winters, especially that they're insect eaters? How does that work for them? Do they have an area
Yeah, so
somewhere?
wouldn't that be nice? We kind
Yeah.
of provide it to an extent.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny this question fell upon me because this was part of my master's work when I was down in Texas. We
Yeah.
wanted to study what bats actually do during winter when you go far enough south that it stays warm all year round. Are these bats still going to caves? Are they migrating south, kind of like you think of with birds? We find that when you go far enough south, they're basically active all year round. Now, in Nebraska, we don't really have that situation. As we all know, it gets pretty cold up here. So what will happen a lot of times is that bats can take one of three different strategies to overwintering in Nebraska. The first is migrating, so they can just book it, leave the area, kind of like you see birds doing right now. They're passing through, going south. There's currently a little bit debate as to how these bats are actually migrating. The initial idea was they just move south, just like birds do. And a recent study was actually done over in California, where they caught a bat on the Gulf Coast, a hoary bat, which is a species we get here in Nebraska. And their thought was, okay, this bat's definitely going to go down to Mexico for the winter. It's going to come back up in the spring, and that's how migration works. That's how it works for birds. So it should work for bats. It turned out what actually happened is this bat went from California to Idaho and then overwintered up in Oregon. So it became pretty clear that, granted, it's an anecdotal note, but pretty clear that we don't really understand bat migration like we thought. And it's going to kind of go into a theme that you're going to see throughout this kind of presentation today, that we don't know as much about bats as we would like to. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of interaction that people have, and then the specialization that you have to really work with them. So kind of ramble a little bit about migration. The second one is hibernation, which is the one people commonly think of with bats, is that, they go into a cave, they hibernate through the winter. This is a less common feature in Nebraska. As most of you know, we don't really have much for caves here. But what we have found is they'll use old abandoned rock quarries and mines. Those are predominant around like Weeping Water and Louisville. And then recently we found them using the rock faces up along the Niobrara and then down along the Republican River as well. So yeah, so really interesting stuff.
Species, you said it's not as common for the hibernation versus migration. We only have 13 species. Do you know, or any of you know off the top of your head, what are those species that are going to be here, like hibernating through the winter?
So it's kind of ironic because probably the greatest diversity of species are our hibernating species, but typically those species are kind of our least common. So they're the most diverse, but the least common that we get. So different species like some of those that Aaron mentioned, like your long-legged and your western small-footed, those are going to be hibernating species, and that might be a reason why they're only in the very northwest tip of Nebraska, because they can get to an area, whether it be the Rockies, you know, up into South Dakota and the Black Hills, or somewhere in Nebraska that we haven't really identified yet. And then a few of the species in the east, they're very rare in the east. And so that's kind of what brings up the diversity in Nebraska, is that we get some species creeping in that regularly occur in the eastern US, but they're a forest bat. And so in Nebraska, we were historically a prairie. And so as we have planted trees and Arbor Day and all that stuff, we basically created habitat for bats to allow some of these species to kind of move into the area that may have historically been exceptionally rare or non-existent in the state.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's two. And then the third one, which is the one that we kind of identified and discussed a lot down south, is this idea of like a resistant strategy, which is a bat that is going to kind of shuffle between a hibernation strategy, and then the moment it warms up, they're going to be out flying around and active. And so we've documented that in Nebraska with big browns, which are kind of our most common species, where basically it warms up enough, they'll come out, be active. It gets cold, they retreat. Sometimes they'll end up in your attic. You'll panic because there's a bat in your house. The moment it warms up again, they're back out there trying to grab a quick snack and then moving on to the next place.
And I know we had a lot of questions about that too, which we will get to later. Like, what do you do if there's a bat in your house, or how do I get them out, or why are they there? That kind of stuff. But and Aaron, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but Brett, you mentioned some of our bats that hibernate in Nebraska and that we don't have a ton of caves, but they'll use like rock faces and the old quarries. I've heard about this thing, like Aaron mentioned, white nose syndrome, talking a little bit about how bats are doing in Nebraska and some of their threats and challenges. And
how are they doing?
Yeah. What's this white nose syndrome, and how are they doing otherwise?
Definitely. Aaron, you want to touch on that?
Sure. So white nose, just because I mentioned it, so that's a fungus, a non-native fungus that was found in New York in 2006. And I think, Sean, you had a map possibly up, and unfortunately it was this really fast spreading fungus that mostly is what originally was found only in cold caves in the eastern part. And what happens is it goes on these bats during hibernation. It's on their nose, their muzzle, it's on their wings. And so when these bats lower their temperatures and lower their energy, this fungus essentially kind of is waking them up as they try to warm their body up and deal with this fungus. It wakes them back up. So all that fat reserve that they've been working so hard for hibernation is now depleting faster and faster and faster. So they don't make it through a full hibernation and ultimately die of exhaustion, essentially. So they were finding, you know, these caves with hundreds of thousands of bats that had just fallen off of the ceiling and were just dead in the caves. Unfortunately, some species, it's up to 90% of kind of the known number that they think have died from white nose.
Wow.
And so it's pretty devastating. And unfortunately, you know, everyone kind of said, oh, well, it'll stay in the east. That's where the caves are. And over the last 15 years, that's not been the case. It slowly has been moving, well, pretty rapidly moved from the east to kind of that line below the Great Lakes. And then it made some odd jumps into the state of Washington and up into Canada. And now it's kind of being detected. And a lot of us, I think, in the bat world are sort of coming to the realization that it's probably there. We just haven't detected it. It's moving a lot more rapidly and in these systems. So yeah, that's white nose.
And then is it in
what?
Do you know how it's being spread? And then is it it has been found in Nebraska then, you said?
Yeah. I mean, the original thought for spread was predominantly people going into caves, but then also, like Brett was mentioning, you have this migration too. So bats are moving and sharing, and then they, in these hibernating periods, they get really close and they cluster. And so you're just, they're rubbing against each other and transferring those spores of the fungus. So we do have it in Nebraska. Again, I think it's documented predominantly in the east. But out here, I know in the west, we have it in Jewel Cave, just north of us. In South Dakota, it's in Wyoming, just to the west of us. So we're kind of figuring, again, maybe in the rock crevices around Fort Robinson or other places, maybe it could be hosted there. We don't know.
Oh, that's devastating. And I
I
didn't
will
realize-
just say,
Go ahead.
if we're talking about white nose, this map and a whole lot of information on white nose, its spread and everything, you can find at whitenosesyndrome.org. It's a great website, very easy to navigate. It's got a lot of really interesting information, but it's a really devastating fungus to a lot of these populations. We've got 5 bats in Nebraska that exhibit symptoms of white nose syndrome. And then we have another 5 that we know carry the fungus, but we haven't seen the syndrome in them yet. So that's 10 out of 13 species that we know are being or potentially affected by this fungus. So it's been really devastating to populations anywhere it's been found so far.
That's too bad. Yeah. Do we
Sorry
have
to hear.
it? We have 13 species. One last Nebraska bat specific question I just thought of. We have 13 species here. Are any of those species threatened and endangered?
Yeah, we've got the one we were discussing earlier, the northern long-ear bat. That one is threatened, both at the federal level and the state level.
Okay, good to know. Okay, are we ready to
What'd you say earlier?
No.
Myth bust? Myth bust?
myth bust?
Myth bust.
Bat myth busting now.
Yeah,
that's
so
what we're moving to.
A lot of reason why we're here. There's a lot of kind of misconceptions and stereotypes that kind of surround bats. So we're going to ask a couple of questions about some ones that you might be familiar with and ones that you might not be familiar with.
And also, as wildlife educators, we have the pleasure of talking and educating with a lot of members of the public, a lot of kiddos, just a ton. And so we get a lot of really fun questions. I feel like we've heard it all.
Yeah, and I'm sure bat experts have heard these as well, and you're probably just going to roll your eyes at us, but there are some good questions.
Yeah.
One that we get a lot, and I believe even your son asked this one.
I asked my 4-year-old before I left, I said, I'm going to go hang out with some bat scientists tonight virtually. What questions do you have for me, buddy? And he wanted to know about bats drinking blood. So we gotta address that one. So do any bats in Nebraska drink blood? And also, if you want to chat a little bit about that interesting niche that some bats have occupied of blood drinking.
I'll go just because I find these ones really cool. These are probably some of my favorite. We don't have any bats that drink blood in Nebraska or anywhere in the United States. For all the bat species out there, there's over 1,300 species. Only 3 drink blood, and they're all found in South America.
Wow.
And so they're pretty amazing if you do ever get a chance to see them or interact with them. They're all a version of the vampire bat, but they have a specialized gap, and they have an anticoagulant, that blood stopper essentially, and it keeps the blood flowing. And it's mostly livestock, chickens, things like that. It's very rarely humans, but they're pretty amazing little critters. So yeah, but only 3. No Nebraska, no United States.
Have you ever, that's good to know, not even in the United States, so we're okay, everybody. But have you ever actually seen one of these cool critters, Erin?
Yeah, down in Nicaragua, I got to spend some time with them and do a lot of bat education, because even down, and Keith, probably you maybe experienced this too, but there's still a lot of fear down there as well, and uneducated people that they think all the bats in Nicaragua are these same vampire bats. And so it's a pretty big educational issue down there as well, but they're phenomenal to work with.
I'll add a little bit more about
Yeah, let's hear Keith.
So as Erin said, there are 3 species. One feeds only on mammal blood, one feeds only on bird blood, and the 3rd species feeds both on mammal and bird blood.
Wow.
So interesting things there. At least I think they all live in caves. So they're not a tree roosting or house roosting bat, at least the one I'm most familiar with. They do crazy things. So when they live in these small groups in caves, if one doesn't get a blood meal that night, they'll actually, another individual will regurgitate some of the blood. It's disgusting, but it's what they do.
So
It's
caring and
cool.
sweet. They care for each other.
They regurgitate, and I mean, back in grad school, reading some papers, it wasn't just related individuals. So it's
Wow.
a true, it's supposedly back then, it was a true study of altruism, where you're helping somebody
Yeah.
else that's not related to yourself. And so I've caught a number of at least the one species that feeds on mammal in Mexico when I was on a trip at Colima. They're really small. They're about the size of our bats here. They're just kind of quick. They have big thumbs and they run very quickly like mice on the ground.
They,
sorry,
they
what?
run.
They run on the ground. Yeah, so
Yeah.
they look almost
Whoa.
like, and so they'll go up to livestock or something like that. I've also read there's the one that feeds on birds. They'll go up to chickens that are like brooding, and at night tap on the side of the chicken, and the chicken thinks it's a chick, and then the chicken will bring it underneath the bird, and then there's a whole brood patch which is like hot and full of capillaries, and so they can get a blood meal there. So
Wow. That sounds genius to me, if I'm being honest.
Does that like bring out the smartness of the bat or like the dumbness of the chicken?
It's a symbiotic
Yeah,
relation.
okay.
Like it's working
Yeah,
together.
it works.
somehow. That's so
And
cool.
you can see a cool video online. There's a PhD student that videoed the vampire bats. It's called Vampire Bat Running on a Treadmill. And you can see how they've kind of like re-evolved this ability to like use their wings to be on the ground and then crawl up, and then and then they're not sucking the blood, they're just lapping it up, kind of like a dog would for water or something.
It's not like the Halloween animals that you see with the huge like, cobra fangs that like bite into the animal and suck it up.
So for the parents out there, if your children want to be bats for Halloween or vampire bats specifically, less focus on this and more focus on like creepily running with their wings, right?
And we will try
And
to find
cooperative
that.
behavior.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's a cool thing.
We'll try and find that video too and send it to everyone in our evaluations and stuff tomorrow as well.
That's
So,
fascinating.
okay, so they don't drink blood in
can I
Nebraska.
add a little bit more?
Yeah.
So they actually occur in Mexico, and they're pretty close to the Texas and Arizona border. And there's been some papers recently that says they're actually moving north. And so we're kind of expecting them to maybe be soon in America.
I see a big smile on your face when you say that.
I'm ready to catch them.
You're gonna go down and welcome them to the border.
There was
that
one there was one record in Del Rio, I think it was Del Rio, Texas. It was in a railroad tunnel, and they think it came up in a train box, a boxcar from Mexico at some time. So we've had them, and they're getting close.
Jumping
So,
train.
Wow. Hey,
Yeah.
in 10 years, if we do this again, maybe they'll be in Nebraska.
I mean, we
No,
can.
they're not going to be that far.
Okay.
So just really quick with that, is that any kind of indication of that an implication of climate change, that range moving north, or is there any thought on why they might be moving north?
I suspect there's some aspects of climate change. I don't remember the details of that paper. Maybe Brett knows. There are other bat species that are definitely being affected by climate change, as well as other changes that humans are doing to the environment. And so that's a lot of what I study in Nebraska. Our dams on our rivers have, in the last 100 years or 50 years, have increased the number of trees along the rivers and less ice jams and floods. And so a lot of our woodland species, from squirrels to mice to bats, are all moving west. And we've almost got, woodchucks that when I was a kid in Omaha, we barely had them in the state, and now we've got them past Ogallala. So there are a number of species that are moving, climate change as well as other human changes to the environment.
That's really interesting. I haven't heard that like kind of chain reaction.
Yeah,
before, so.
yeah.
Okay, so I think Brett or somebody, maybe Christopher, mentioned this at the beginning, but here's another myth busting question. Are they actually blind? Everyone's heard you're blind as a bat. So like, where did that come from? And is it true? Someone can speak to that. You can fight for it.
I guess I can follow up then.
Okay.
Yeah, I brought that up. It act like I have no idea how that became a thing, because once you're handling a bat and you let them go and you see how they fly, like it's insane. Like if you're a nocturnal animal, I don't know how you could operate and be blind. So yeah, I'm not really sure how that became a thing, but they can all
Do you think people think because they have the echolocation, that sonar, it's like, I do feel like I've heard they think that's the only way.
Like they
that
don't need eyes. They
Yeah,
just
they could
use
like-
that.
Like Marco
blindfold.
Polo.
Okay.
You know, like we don't need to start playing that, but no.
Well,
Example,
we
but-
get- yeah.
Right.
I mean, maybe like some bats, they'll actually come out before it's completely dark.
Hmm.
They'll sort of use the vegetation and terrain to figure out where they are.
Mhm.
So they're not always using echolocation, some of them. But yeah, I think that a lot of bats, that's primarily how they see and are able to navigate at night, is through that high frequency sound that basically operates as sonar and they can make mental images in their heads. So they like map out their surroundings that way.
That's phenomenal. What's their actual, just their vision like then? They have decent vision? I think you said they
It's
have.
kind of like ours. You
Yeah.
said about.
Yeah, I think it varies between species. So there are some daytime bats. So like the flying foxes that Sean was, like some bats like that, they will fly around during the daytime. They eat fruit, so they don't really need to echolocate as much. They're not chasing fruit through the air like other
Yeah.
insects and stuff. And then there's other bats like the vampire bats that sort of have like the heat-seeking pits.
I didn't know they
So
had
it's
that.
not
That's
just
like a snake. Yeah.
all that.
I knew you were gonna get excited about that. That's cool. Keith, you look like you're about to jump in on this question. I see it.
I was going to come up with maybe a hypothesis of
Ooh,
that bats are blind. Many of all the bats that we have here in North America and South America are what we call the Microchiroptera. And so they generally have actually fairly small eyes, but they can still see. And Sean was talking about the Megachiroptera, or the bigger fruit bats that are in the old world in Africa and Australia. And that big skull right there, that's not what we have here. And so those really have huge eyes. And at one time in the literature, they thought they were actually more related to primates, the humans and monkeys and apes, because of some of the structures in the eye were very close in terms of their great ability to see. And so we now know that the bats are one monophyletic group. That means they're all related, more closely related to other bats, both the big bats or the little bats. But my guess is seeing, if you see some of these animals that go underground or live in caves, they have really small eyes compared to their body. And so maybe people seeing a lot of these little bats with little eyes didn't think that they were able to see very well or at all. So that's just a complete guess. I mean, I'd have to go look that up.
yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Kind of a follow-up question that I hear a lot too is, are bats going to fly into your hair?
Yeah, that's another myth.
I hear that a lot, and people ask about that a lot. So
It's like a fear that people have. So yeah, would that
I'll
actually
go.
happen? Yeah, let's hear it.
I'll go on this one. I guess, yeah, I mean, it's a possibility that a bat could fly and get stuck in your hair. And of course, they've got these light bones and little claws on the end and hooked feet. So, they're going to get potentially wrapped up in there, but they're not trying to get to you or in your hair. What they're trying to do most likely is get the insects that are attracted to you. And so they're actually trying to help you. So if you see bats that are flying close to you, best thing you can do is not move. Because
I thought you were going to say thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you don't move, then they're going to be able to use their echolocation, note where you are, and just focus on that insect and be able to potentially prevent that insect from biting you, like if it's a mosquito or something like that. And so that's one of the things that, we hear quite often, that they were trying to attack me and get in my hair. Well, it doesn't do them any good to get stuck in your hair. It just wastes their energy and stresses them out as well. So they're just trying to eat the insects that are flying around you.
I have a small anecdotal comment on this one. I'm going to call my sister out because I see she's not here tonight, so I am able to do that. But a few years ago during 4th of July, which is the kind of its own like topic, I feel like for bats, lots of fireworks were happening near my parents' house. They live near Elkhorn River, so there's like some really good habitat there. And suddenly my sister, who's not as much of a nature nerd as I am, let's be real, she started screaming and squealing, and she like a bat must have been stunned or confused with fireworks and fell kind of near her, and then it flew off right away, but it was like this big whole thing. And so I don't know, I don't think in that instance it was like probably fireworks were really confusing and stunning. I know I always worry about bats during 4th of July, but it probably just kind of threw them off. I don't know.
When I did an internship at the Omaha Zoo,
Yeah.
and in the Kingdoms of the Night area, you know, the big bat area with the water, I was just amazed that when I would walk out there, I put my waders on and walk out to the middle and dump the fruit out, there'd be like all around me, and people would always be like, they're gonna hit you. And it just was amazing, like their accuracy of them going around you. And I had a couple like land on me, but like just as I'm tired, I want to rest for a second, and then they like flew away, like instantly, like
That's
you said. But
amazing.
yeah, like Sean, you were talking about, they're not trying to get stuck in your hair. They're helping you, or they're trying to get the fruit or whatever. But it was kind of cool. Yeah.
Their echolocation is actually really precise. There's a lot in the literature and some more general topic books too about their echolocation. And if you look at the ears, and every species is different because they use different frequencies for echolocation. But if you look at the ears in our bats mostly, they have different shapes. And so they're getting that sound in different ways. Some of them have really tall pinna, so the big part of the ear. Some have like a really pointed tragus, which is the little middle part that sticks up. Some of those are more blunt, more rounded. There are other species that live in other areas called leaf-nosed bats. And they have this really unique, intricate design kind of on the front of their face. And they think they use those features for echolocation. So there's all sorts of really interesting research into how they echolocate, how precise they can be. And it's really fascinating to see how effective they actually are by using those sounds.
Makes me think, how long I'm deviating a little bit from the myth. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I
These are good
gotta go
questions, yeah.
here. How long have bats been around? And the reason I ask that is because how long have they been here to kind of evolve these like phenomenal adaptations for those things? Can anyone speak to that?
That sounds like a Keith or a Brett question.
I always forget the number of millions of years.
Yeah.
It's been a while, but it does. Those numbers are not on the top of my head.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, they have fossils of bats, so they trace them way back into the fossil record. And you know, bats are one of the most diverse group of mammals, right behind rodents, and so they have to have been around for a long time in order for that to be the case.
Yeah. Speaking of that, one of the other questions that we get a lot, or like assumptions about bats, is like, oh, dude, they're just flying mice. Look at those little flying mice. So are they related to rodents? I know you spoke to it a little bit, but are they related to rodents at all, besides just being mammals?
No, there's a lot of different orders of mammals, and so bats and rodents are definitely pretty far apart. So yeah.
All right, so I'm going to bring up kind of a controversial issue here. We always hear a lot, and unfortunately, bats get that stereotype that they have rabies and they're more likely to get rabies. And I feel like we hear about all the times that bats are, you know, diagnosed for rabies, but then you don't hear about the times that aren't.
Yeah.
So like what?
The big fear factor.
Yeah. So like people are scared about it. What is the like actual percentage of the amount of bats that have it? I've heard like less than 0.5% of bats that are captured that are tested actually have rabies. So talk a little bit about bats and rabies. Is that something that we really should be scared of, or like is that just it's no more than any other type of mammal? Kind of touch on that.
I'll let you go, Brett, but I've got my story, which you might have heard from me. So
sounds good. So you guys are exactly right. So rabies is really rare in bats. That 0.5% is kind of what has been talked about these days. There was a study that came out a few years ago that said it was like 6 or 7%, but that was individuals that were being turned in that this bat bit me. We get it tested. It has rabies. Well, for the most part, bats are pretty elusive, pretty secretive animals. That's why we don't see them all that often. And so rabies interacts with the neurological processes of an animal. And so they tend to act more aggressive. They tend to be found out in the open more. And so your interactions with a rabid bat are going to be higher than with a non-rabid bat. Now, not to bring the fear into the case there, but you should always treat any bat like the possibility that it could potentially have rabies. So you don't want to be picking it up, handling it, touching it, or anything like that. You always want to call a professional to come out, and if you have a bat in your house, to have them come out, remove it for you or something like that. If you ever are bit by a bat, again, always treat it like the bat would have rabies. Go in, seek medical attention, get checked out for it. If you catch rabies early enough.
Oh,
what's that?
You got to keep the bat.
Yes.
If you get bitten by the bat, keep the bat so we can get the bat tested too. Not only, but it is a night and it's black and white if the bat has rabies or not have rabies. So it'll save a lot of money. If you can just if the bat that bit you, give it to the East Campus at UNL, and they will tell you within a day if it's hot, if it's positive or not. And then if it's clean, you don't have to worry about getting rabies shots. But you worry about yourself, but if you can keep that bat, it could have saved a family here $100,000 because there's 5 people in the house, and somebody told them to all get rabies shots, which was not the right thing to do. So.
Oh man!
And like you said, rabies shots are not an inexpensive. Not like the COVID shot that's free with insurance kind of thing. So
also, don't you get it in your stomach? That's what I've heard.
No, that's the old way. That's the old way.
Busted. Okay.
They used to do it. My dad got all 9 of his shots in the stomach, but for us, at least the pre-series, the prophylactic series is three shots.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention that too, that for those of us that do work with bats, we all get pre-exposure shots, so we do a series beforehand. And then I think CDC recommends every 2 years you get your titer checked. I mean, that's what you should do. I don't know how many of you guys do, but just to make sure that you have that in your system. So that's why we can go out and handle them and work with them, is we do have that kind of pre-step before we go out.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I've had my titer. I haven't had any boosters, but every time I check it, I still have it. And I think I got mine in 94, 95. My dad still has his titer from the mid 70s or early 70s. He's never had a booster. So
wow, that's fascinating. We have one last myth busting question, but maybe there's some in the lightning round. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
But this one specifically, and I do hear this a lot. In fact, again, my family has dealt with this too. I mean, I know quite a bit of people who've dealt with this, but why do bats find their way into people's homes? What does that look like? What's the life history or the ecology of a bat? Maybe even an annual cycle of a bat that you would be able to find it in your home. And what can people do to prevent that? I know that's a tall order, but that is something that I feel like that's a big connection that the general public has to bats often. Like the first time they even care about a bat is like, oh my God, there's one in my house.
Or it's in your vent, or it's in an eave by your, it's with the bat.
All right, so I'll start on this one because I'm the Batman of Kearney, and there's a lot of bats in Kearney, and I've been in many people's houses.
Did you say you're the Batman in Kearney?
I am.
Do you have the signal and everything?
Is the symbol coming out?
That's amazing. Wow,
there's a video somewhere where there's a symbol coming out of the clock tower at UNK calling me.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay.
So the number 1 house bat in Nebraska is the big brown bat. And Brett, I think, was the first one to catch one, or actually document them, that before there were houses, so wooden houses across the landscape in Nebraska, we actually found one in the Pine Ridge that used ponderosa pine and maybe a cottonwood too. So these are wood, they roost in trees generally, but now that we have spread trees and houses across the Great Plains, as Sean said, we find them in like every city in Nebraska. I don't care how small. If there's a house, even farmsteads in the Sandhills, they have bats out there too. So I think they're just using houses as a sense of a big hollow tree.
Mm.
And, most of them that are in the summertime in your attic, they're picking the hottest and really hot attics. And so these trees are houses are huge trees that have a huge thermal mass with these shingles on top that really heat up really hot. And so most of these are maternity colonies of 5 to 30 or to 50 bats that are using these warm attics, which are hollow trees, to raise their young. And so there are, in my neighborhood, there are summer houses that have bats in the summer, and then there's some in the wintertime that have the hibernacula. And so, because I used to walk my dog every night above 60 degrees, even in the wintertime, and they do come out anytime it's sunny in Nebraska above 60 degrees, in Kearney in above 60 degrees. And so I think they're just using, houses as a way to raise their young fast. These bats have a very limited time to raise their raise their babies in the summer. And so they need to, be born, grow up, learn to fly and echolocate and catch enough insects for these hibernators, the big brown bat, to put on enough fat for time. And so it's a really condensed, they've got to do a lot in a short amount of time. So you pick these hot buildings. And I think there's a recent study in Canada that showed that the bats that roosted in houses in an area actually grew faster than the ones that were in the rock crevices nearby. So
I really like that and that's why I asked that question of tell me about their life history and their ecology in this perspective. I like that he said to a bat, essentially, the house is like just a hollow tree. And so I know when I hear from a lot of people, they're just like, why are they doing this? And this is frustrating. It's almost like people take it personally. But I like kind of like turning that perspective around of like, that's what it looks like to a bat. So it's nothing.
They're not being manipulative.
Yeah, you have a phenomenal, like, cozy little hot attic to raise my babies.
Like, it's like a compliment, actually.
Yeah,
if you have bats in your house.
Should you throw like a baby bat shower?
Yeah.
Okay. New idea. Okay. Anyways, very cool. So how is it a problem? I know maybe as a bat biologist, maybe you'd be like excited about this, but what should people do? What are some options? It sounds also like it's a little temporary, like it just kind of it happens for a reason and then move on. Like, what does that look like?
So again, there are certain houses in my neighborhood, and I don't know the difference, that some of them are definitely summer roost and then some are winter roosts. What I usually say is, I don't want to exclude some companies from Lincoln, but they will come out to Kearney for a lot of money, thousands of dollars, and secure your house. But what I say is get a handyman, a ladder, and a can of Expandifoam, and seal. Basically, they like to land on shingles and go where a roof line goes under a roof line. That's about 90% of where the bats are entering your house. And so if you can get under, if there's a dormer coming out, there's always an overlap of where a shingle is going underneath another roof line. And so
what's a good time to do that? Because as you said,
so
the summer.
I always suggest to people that you do it in May, and then in starting probably for big brown bats, we'll just say late July, August, and September, that those are good times to exclude, because if you exclude them during June and July, there will be baby bats in there. And then I always say, about an hour after sunset's probably the best. So everything leaves. It's hotter than heck up there in those attics. Come out to drink. And so you get them all out. When there's no babies in there, you get them all in that first 45 to an hour period. And if the handyman will be up there in the dark, that's the time to exclude them. And then they'll go to the neighbor's house once they get excluded. If I ever wanted another business in Kearney, it would just be, one house to the next. So.
And they can squeeze in like the size of like, is it a dime or a quarter? They can squeeze into very, very tiny areas. Isn't that true? So even if you think like, oh, a bat can't get in there, they probably can.
Sean showed you the skull of one of our bigger bats, the big brown bat that'll get in the house. And so, a half of an inch. It just needs to get that width of that whole skull with the jaw through a hole and they'll be able to squeeze their way through. So
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be that big of a space.
Those are really helpful tips though,
Yeah,
be
yeah.
honest.
And we'll put some of that stuff in our
in our
send
email.
out tomorrow
And it
too.
sounds more of like a preventative, if you think about like a preventative situation versus like, and when it happens and we're freaking out
Yes.
and we're calling
It's not like The Office.
and we're calling our daughter and saying, what do we do? And oh,
Yeah.
that's just my personal story with my parents, but that's fine. We're learning a lot tonight. That's fantastic.
All right, well, we learned a lot about some myths. We talked about what do you do if a bat gets in your house? And so we have now a very important question for all of you. We would like to know, what is your favorite bat species and why?
I hope you were prepared.
And we want to know like some cool adaptations or
Yeah.
like, why is this bat your favorite?
Well, my favorite is a spotted bat. They're a relatively small size bat, but their ears are almost as big as their body. And they're a black bat with 3 white spots. They're extremely rare in western parts of the United States. And I've had the good fortune to be able to catch quite a few and publish a number of papers on them. And so they're just super cool. And they're
That
so
sounds like
docile.
they look like a little cow or something, black with white spots. They look pretty cute.
For my first daughter's first Halloween, we dressed her up as a spotted bat.
Okay.
Adorable.
They're so cute.
That's
And,
amazing.
this species, unlike the big brown bat can be a little aggressive and a little bitey, but the spotted bat is so docile. They only eat moths. They have really small faces. They're super cute. So that's my favorite one, at least in North America. Yeah, there he is. They're just a spectacular bat. And I was able to get Brett into a spot to catch it's been a few summers now, but down in New Mexico. So that's my
Very
favorite
cool.
one.
Awesome.
And for those of you not in Nebraska, we don't have that one in Nebraska. He missed that. So,
It's still in the United States.
but yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
Brett, what's your favorite bat?
So I could take the Keith route and pick the big charismatic spotted bat because they are awesome. But I'm going to go with one that I worked with. It's called the Western red bat. So it's a very close relative to one that's very common in Nebraska called the Eastern red. But what's interesting about the Western red bat is that it is a foliage roosting bat. So it's going to roost in the leaves of trees, but they occur in the desert Southwest. And so we actually did a study when I was a graduate student at Kearney, when I was working under Keith, to figure out where these bats were roosting and what they were using as roosts, because they're in the middle of the desert. So what are they using? Well, it turns out that they still use the foliage of trees, but they are so tightly associated to those trees that if you really start drifting away from there, you don't get those bats anymore. So they're almost like kind of weaseling their way in and taking advantage of those areas, just kind of opportunistically. And if those trees weren't there, those bats probably wouldn't be there. But
Wow.
it was a really neat study because we'd put these radio tags on them and we'd track them to a tree. And most bats are roosting kind of in these cavities within the or underneath the bark of the tree, or within these holes like woodpecker holes and things like that. But again, this one's using the leaves of trees. So you could actually get to a tree, take out your binoculars, look around in the leaves, and you'd find just a ball of bats, roosting together. So it was a really, really cool study, and definitely something that I really remember in all the years that I've done this work. So
Very cool. Very cool. Who's next?
I'll go. Since Brett mentioned the Western bat, I have to say that mine's the Eastern red bat, which is one that you can find here. And they just look, I mean, their fur is so different, color-wise than other species. But what's also really cool is the Eastern red bat commonly has 2, 3, or even 4 pups. And so a lot of species just have 1, maybe 2, but usually just 1. The Eastern red bat has up to 4, and it's not uncommon. We actually had one crash land in our backyard, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And I went and was going to put it up in the tree so it could take off again. And I flipped her over, and it was a lactating female that had 4 baby bats on her.
Wow.
And I don't know how
You just
she was
happened
able
to land in
fly.
the backyard of a bat biologist.
Yeah.
That is a
Yeah,
lucky bat.
so It was, well, she was getting chased by a grackle, so I think she
Of
was
course.
just crash landing wherever. So, but no, I mean, they're really really a cool species, and to see those like 4 little bats hanging on to mom while she was trying to get away from her predator, it was pretty cool.
I to be honest, I didn't know that they could fly with babies on them.
Like that many too.
Is that a common thing, or was that a do or die?
You know, it depends on the species. Most of them, they will leave them in one spot, especially as they start getting bigger, because that takes a lot of energy to have them on you while you fly. And so a lot of times they will leave them up in, you know, the attic or the tree or the cave or wherever they're at for the maternity roost, come back and nurse during the day. But when they're real small, they can, if they have to leave an area because of predator change in weather or something like that, then they can, but it's difficult.
Well, we all know that book Stella Luna.
Yes.
And the mom and the baby that separated. So
Yes.
it's known right there. Also, baby bats are called pups. This is what I heard.
Yeah.
Really love that. That's so exciting. Okay. Erin or Christopher, favorite bat and why?
Sure, I'll go. My favorite bat is the pallid bat. That's again one of those odd ones found down in the Southwest. Being from Arizona originally, we have a lot of scorpions and a lot of centipedes. And pallid bats are pretty cool because they have kind of these elongated and really sharp thumbs. And so in flight, they can they kind of end up picking up the scorpion, and they're immune to their venom. And then they can eat scorpions and centipedes and things. And so again, being from Arizona, awesome bat.
So they go down to the ground. They're not like going for flying insects and things. They go down to the ground to get scorpions.
Yeah, they can. They can swoop down. They can use that tail, that patagium on the bottom, and kind of scoop them up and use those thumbs to hook them. And then again, if the scorpion stings them, they're immune to that venom.
That's so
And then they usually will eat them in flight. And so they're pretty cool.
That's super cool.
That is
I
really
feel
cool.
like I need to see a video of this or something.
I've got we put some light tags, little light tags, and broke them open, shook them, and then glued them to the bottom of pallid bats, and they'd fly about 6 or 8 feet above the ground, and then they disappear, and that's when they hit the ground for crickets and grasshoppers and anything else, scorpions, centipedes. But I just want to mention, because we talked about pollinating bats not being in Nebraska or in the area, but pallid bats are not nectar feeding bats, but they also eat pollen too. And so they're actually a pollinator, and they were found in Torrington, Wyoming. So they're so close to being in Nebraska, which we could almost consider them to be a pollen feeding bat. So
that's awesome. I hadn't heard that. That's great.
Yeah, they crash and burn into, you know, they come into the mist net in the Southwest with all this yellow and pollen on them. And I'm like, are you eating insects? And so no, they're actually eating the pollen and potentially nectar too on these flowers. And they're actually a better pollinator because they don't have all the adaptations to hover. So they just land and crash. So they're a better pollinator than the pollinating species of bats.
Wow. Okay. So cool.
That is
I wanted to
really
learn
neat. I'm
one
learning
thing
so much,
tonight.
yeah.
I'm learning like a million things.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Christopher, your favorite bat and why?
Well, there's a lot to choose from, but I think that one that I would like to see is the Honduran white bat. It's not in the US, but they're a kind of tent-making bat. So they roost under the leaves of large trees, and they sort of nibble at the leaf stalk, so it sort of collapses on itself. It's not kind of like a tent. And they just sort of they hang out. They're white, but when you look at them from below, they look green because of how the light hits the leaf.
Good camouflage, yeah.
Okay, so we've learned so far tonight, like bats can eat scorpions. They can literally make shelters. Like, what can bats not do?
Did you ever see the movie Anastasia when you were little?
I
And they had the
think
white
of-
bat.
Yep.
Was that
Was
the
that
one
the
you found?
Honduran?
I don't know.
Did he make a tent?
His name was Bartok. I remember that.
Oh my God.
He was sassy.
You remember the most
He was the
amazing
sassy
thing.
bat in the cartoon bat. Okay.
That's phenomenal. That's so cool.
I will point out one real quick, and maybe Keith or Aaron have seen this. There is a bat. It's probably one of my favorites I haven't seen. but it's a greater bulldog bat, and it can fish. It can pull fish out of the water
Okay, so
and eat
They
them.
can do
They're-
everything, yeah.
Yeah, super
Those ones-
adorable. But
Those ones are super creepy though, to pull out of a net, because
oh, really?
they like,
'Cause
they
of
have
the
these
claws?
huge legs.
Yeah.
And so they're so cool, but they like and they stink, and they're just these big legs that kind of come out of the bag. They're great, but they're so funny because they're just
Oh my gosh.
weird.
I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah, that would be really odd to take them out of a net. So
And,
Yeah, they're just,
our colleagues from Lincoln, Dr. Trish Freeman
Yeah,
calls
I
them
mentioned them.
a kind of a saber-toothed bat because they have really long canines and they
Mm.
really hurt when they bite. Their personal experience. So
Yeah, just to kind of touch on what Keith is saying, we have a bat biologist who worked for quite a while here in the state of Nebraska at the university. She's a curator, Patricia Freeman, and she couldn't make it tonight, but she was mentioning she has a bat named after her.
Yes.
It's the Freeman's, is it dog-faced bat? Is that what it's called? But it's kind of cool. Like Amber and I were talking, you know, like,
One of my favorite professors.
yeah, I mean, how cool is it that you study bats your whole life, and then, you know, you're kind of like hallelujah moment as you get a bat named after you.
That's
So
pretty fun.
that's awesome. And right here from Nebraska too. So very neat.
Well, we have so maybe people didn't know this, how many amazing like scientists and experts we have right here in Nebraska on bats.
Yeah,
That's
we're
pretty
not a
cool.
boring state.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
We've got lots
So-
going on. One of our last questions for you before our lightning round, because we do have some questions we want to get to, is basically, you know, it's Bat Week, and we do these things because we want people to know how amazing these creatures are. We want people to know, you know, what threats they face and what they can do to help. But before we understand that, we want to know from you, and everyone can just say one thing if you'd like to go around. Why should people care about bats? Why should they not only not be scared of them and not fear them, but why should they actually care about them and think they're pretty amazing? If you could have your soapbox.
there's so many reasons to choose. I mean, it's easy for me to say because, you know, I'm interested in them, but you know, if you want to take the what is it doing for me, the ecosystem services route, if you will, you know, they help control insects. So if you don't like things buzzing around you, you don't like overpopulation of, you know, certain moths eating your ornamental trees or something like that, the bats help control those populations.
It's good. Yeah, it's valid.
Yeah, so tying into what Sean said, you know, we're in Nebraska, so we all love our corn here. There was a study done by Justin Boyles. He works at Southern Illinois. And what he was doing was he was trying to see just kind of what impact bats have on kind of your pest insects. And so what he did is he set up cages over cornfields, and he'd set one over several corn stalks, and he'd leave another set open as a control. And he'd look at how much damage the uncovered corn stalks had compared to the covered ones, because the ones that were uncovered would be predated by insect or by bats, and then those that were covered were kind of bat exclusions. And then they ran all these crazy models that I don't fully understand, but basically extrapolated out to the impact of bats worldwide is about $1 billion per year for farmers in crop damage and then extra pesticide use. So we have to remember that a lot of times, a lot of the work that we're doing when it comes to, like, you know, introducing herbicides and pesticides, we're basically trying to recreate Mother Nature from that end. And sometimes we just kind of have to take a step back and let her do her own thing. And so bats, in a way, are Mother Nature's pesticide.
Yeah.
And so if we just kind of let them run their course, you know, we don't have to worry about whatever toxic chemicals are being sprayed on our food that could be leached in our waterways and things like that. And we have a perfectly natural solution that's taking care of it all for us.
That's cool. I like that perspective.
I mean, I think one we've sort of talked about is pollination. You know, but partly just flowers and things that are beautiful and ornamental, but then there's a lot of fruits and different things that are also solely pollinated by bats. They're kind of the hummingbirds and butterflies of the night, you know, so things like bananas and dates and figs and peaches and avocados and all kinds of trees that have those flowers on them are pollinated pretty, not if not solely by bats, but are very highly influenced by bats and pollination. So we wouldn't have a lot of those crops if we didn't have bats.
Yeah, that's good to know.
And plants like saguaro cactus and a lot of the other columnar cactus in Mexico are also mainly pollinated by some of the nectar feeding bats. And so one anecdotal thing with white nose syndrome, trying to bring in things from other parts of this talk, is that somebody from, actually, I think it was Prince Edward Island in northeastern Canada, said after white nose syndrome, the number of mosquitoes in that place is just crazy. And so that's why I met them in the Southwest, just because, again, it's just these bats are the number one thing for us in the United States is insect control, nighttime insect control. But also with the fruit eating bats, they're also seed dispersers. And so sometimes hurricanes go through in places and wipe out, or human disturbance. And so bats are actually huge seed dispersers of another whole group of plants, if not some of the plants that they're, so yeah, they can be the first ones to, when they fly and poop at the same time, disperse those seeds all over the air environments.
Amazing. Christopher?
Yeah, I think you guys mentioned the agave plants, so it's more than just the fruit and stuff. Also, bat poop is actually really good fertilizer as well, since they're eating so many insects and stuff. So
I just give Jim Carrey and guano. That's where my mind goes with that. And also I think of like the fact that even some makeup products used to be used with guano. So I think hopefully not.
Lipstick,
still.
mascara.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what I have on right now. Maybe.
I mean, you prepared for tonight.
I mean, yeah.
We did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Very cool. So
awesome.
should we do our lightning round?
Yeah, we got about 10 minutes left or so here. And usually what we try to do is we had all of you register, and a lot of you had really good questions, and we want to make sure that we get those
Super good
answered.
questions.
So with our lightning round, what we're going to do is we have a bunch of questions here, and we're just going to ask the experts and kind of just answer them like briefly. Not all of you have to go around and say every answer, but if one of you kind of wants to take it, we can get a lot of questions from our audience answered. So
Okay, ready?
yeah, you want to start?
Yes. Okay, so let's see. We've covered some of these ones. How do you provide more shelter?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, yeah. All right, so one of them was, how do you provide more shelter for bats that are roosting in our patio awning? So I guess there's some people who don't want the bats in their homes. And this person, thank you very much. How do you provide shelter for bats? That's a really good question, because I have heard some cool solutions for that. So who would like to talk about that?
I guess I'll go ahead and take the lead on this one. So you guys have probably seen the bat houses that are kind of readily available for sale. They're really easy to make. So if you just look up plans online, you can kind of build and make your own. And the trick for putting those out, kind of going off of what Keith talked about earlier when it came to bats getting into your house, is that if you exclude a bat from your house or underneath your patio or wherever it might be, basically you're pushing them to somewhere else. And so they need somewhere else to go. And so providing a bat house before you basically provide this exclusion of these bats will encourage them to look for a new location, hopefully that bat house. And so the best way to do it, kind of like if you're going hunting or fishing or something like that, is to put it in a area that is most enticing for the animal that you're trying to target. And so you're trying to target bats in this case. So bats are using a roost as a form of protection, a form to stay warm. So by putting a bat house on the south side or facing south, that increases the sun exposure. Put it out in the open, put it out in the sun. So don't put it where it's covered by trees or shade or things like that. And then put it high up. You want it in places that a bat is going to feel safe. If it's low and close to the ground, you know, a snake or a raccoon or your neighborhood cat can reach up in there and grab them. They're not going to feel comfortable with that. So putting it high up, putting it out of the way is going to be the best way to get them to use it. And what I always tell people with it is don't get discouraged if a bat's not using your house. It can take weeks, it can take months. There are times where it even takes years. But kind of once a bat starts using the bat house and it feels safe, it'll tell its friends. And then before you know it, you have a full colony that's using that bat house.
Yeah, because bats are friendly and cooperative.
Yeah, they
There's
care
the
about each
background.
other. They
Yeah.
like puke up and regurgitate the blood.
Yeah.
Remember? We talked about this. Yeah.
Amazing.
Aaron, we actually had a question in the chat about when you were talking about your pallid bats. Someone had asked that scorpions fluoresce under black light. So they wanted to know if the pallid bats see in this range, or do they use echolocation, or do we know about this?
Good question.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know, honestly. Keith, I don't know if you've ever seen anything, but I can't say I've ever heard that was a light range that they can see, and I would presume it's all echolocation. But Keith, do you know different?
Sounds like a project. Seems like we need to go out and
like
investigate it in
Susan.
science.
Yeah, you stumped them.
That's awesome.
That would be pretty neat if they could. I mean, you think about the vampire bat and kind of having that heat, sort of heat index. So maybe, why not?
There's a lot we don't know about bats. That's for sure.
Suzanne, if you find the answer to that, you should share that with us, but I'm probably going to be Googling this too now.
Yeah,
If
I
it's
know you
known.
will be.
If it's
Yeah.
not known, that's a good study.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome question. What's our next one? Okay. What's the average lifespan for a bat? That's a really good one.
So I guess I'll start with this one. It's probably going to vary a lot, but it's more than what most people think. So they are the size of a mouse, and a mouse reproduces many times in a short amount of time, but bats have generally, as Sean said, one pup per year. And so thinking about population sizes, a lot of mice are prey for a lot of other animals. Bats don't have a lot of predators, and so bats can live 10, 20, 30, I think even up to 40 years. I think they're 36 for a little brown bat. It's really crazy. So it can be way longer than you think. Now we have a population in Happy Jack chalk mine of tricolored bats, and they don't seem to be living too long there, although they can, maybe 3 to 5 years at most we've seen. So we're hoping to see some of those other ones come back, or maybe they're just passed on. So.
My mom's kind of from that area, that Happy Jack chalk mine area, and I always loved that place as a kid. Scared the crap out of me.
I've still never been there.
Oh, you need to go.
Okay.
They used to do Halloween tours, but I think since the bats been in there, they haven't been doing it. Sorry. Anyway, tangent. Someone else also want to know, and Christopher, you mentioned this a little bit when you mentioned like why people should like bats. You mentioned the poop or the guano. Someone had asked, is that harmful for people and pets? Like we talked a little bit about like how it used to be used in cosmetic products, but like, is it just the amount, or is it a certain time that it sits there? And
we're probably not going to
ferments?
suggest for anyone to like lick it. Or
Yes,
anything.
absolutely not.
But I guess if
Eat
you have
it
a
or
dog
anything,
and there's
but-
guano, is there any kind of harm there?
Yeah, I don't know that it's all that more harmful than any other sort of wildlife poop you would come across.
Here's the answer.
There have been cases of histoplasmosis, which is another fungal disease. So like if you were going to mess with bat poop, probably a good idea to wear a mask of some sort, but if you come across it, unless you're going into a cave where there's mounds of it, as long as you don't mess with it, you're probably okay.
I might jump in there. So histoplasmosis can be with pigeons and chickens, and I've probably been more exposed to histoplasmosis, and it usually has to be wet fecal matter. And so I like to say with people in their attics where it's hot and dry, that there's really not an issue with histoplasmosis ever in your attics with bat poop. And so I think it's very not going to be very dangerous at all. And I wouldn't be licking it. There's probably some parasites in there, some things like that. But in terms of,
Yeah. Yeah.
I always say to people when I go in with to sometimes these attics with a respirator on to study the bats, it's actually not the bats I'm worried about. It's the mice that are also up in potentially those attics with hantavirus. And so I'm not worried about dry bat fecal matter at all, or guano.
That's good.
So I'll say a story from mine. The other part is, when you do find these large mounds of it, it's usually, as Keith was noting, not only the fecal matter, but the urine as well. And so we were doing some research in a grain room of a barn that was maybe, 10 foot by 10 foot, but had about 2.5 feet of guano in it. So you'd open the door and it would just kind of spill out. And it was a nursery colony. So, I mean, it was wall to wall, like baby bats. And me and another person ended up getting pneumonia it was a chemical induced pneumonia from all of the urine in there, because we didn't have good enough protection on at the time. So that's something that you do have to be careful of if there's not good ventilation in that area.
And a little danger of the job too, I guess.
Yeah.
Diving into those situations.
Sean, I think you told us the story on Friday when we were like processing trout. So it was nice to hear in a different light right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, otherwise, those were kind of our questions. We talked a little bit about the rest of them kind of during our talk tonight. So we're going to go ahead and kind of wrap it up. It was a little bit longer of a program, but we had a lot of good questions and we had a lot of our experts on tonight, and we wanted to make sure that we got to hear from them. So let's go ahead and give a round of applause. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Aaron, Brett, Christopher, Keith, and Sean for taking your time out of your day to join us. We really appreciate it. So again, it's Bat Week. Until
Happy Bat Week, everybody.
Sunday. Yeah, go celebrate Bat Week. Go appreciate
Happy Bat Week.
Yes. And we will be sending out a evaluation to everyone that registered. We talked a lot about good resources tonight. We're going to mention those, and then we are also going to have our panel list in there, their contact information. So if you have any other questions or things that you think of, I'm sure that they would love to talk bats.
I know that I still
with
have
you.
probably 27 questions.
Amber will probably
At
one of
least.
those people that.
But I'll
contacts
wait
you.
on it and I'll figure it out. But I'm sure everyone else, if this helped pique your interest tonight with bats, definitely go and do some of your own research. Suzanne, it looks like you have a project to work on with the fluorescent lights. That's so cool. But keep being curious, keep nerding out. It's really exciting. The natural world is phenomenal, especially the more we can learn about it. So thank you everyone for your questions tonight, and experts, thank you so much again for your time. It's been a really good night.
Yes, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.